If you were learning to shoot your hunting rifle today, where would you begin? I got my license 30 years ago, but it was only just an entry ticket. In reality, it took me several seasons before I felt confident in the field. And at that time, I missed opportunities because I was too slow. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to learn to shoot my hunting rifle if I had to start all over again and wanted to learn it fast. You don't even have to be a beginner to benefit from what I'll share now. If you bought a new piece of gear, or if you want to learn a new shooting position, the points I'll share will help you speed up the learning curve as well. To learn to shoot your hunting rifle and to learn it fast, I want you to focus on 3 components. And for each of those components, I want to take you through a couple of points that you must get right. The first component is your shooting position, and let's start with the first quote-unquote problem and see if you recognize some of these symptoms or challenges. Maybe you're too slow to shoot, too slow to get into position. Maybe you're not getting the accuracy and the consistency or precision and consistency that you want. And perhaps you feel that you are unproductive at the range. You spend a session there, but you don't really feel you get tangible results. The root cause could be one of the common mistakes I see among hunters, which is a lack of a clear plan. And I mean a lack of a clear plan for establishing or building your shooting position. And not having a clear plan will ruin several things. It means you'll be slower to get into position, slower to shoot. It means your precision will suffer, your accuracy will suffer. And it also means that you will be less stealthy when establishing a shooting position. So the simple solution is to develop a plan for each shooting position. But how do you do that? I recommend that you use some universal checks for any given shooting position so you know you tick the right boxes. When I teach, I use the ASBI model. A stands for aim, which means that you need to first aim with your body when you build the position. S stands for support, which means you also need to have a clear plan for how you use your bipod, tripod or sticks. B stands for build, which is the specific checks that you run through to build the correct shooting position, and that covers how you hold the rifle, making sure you have straight lines, triangles, squares and contact points. And I stands for index, which means the specific ways you interface with the specific rifle to achieve consistency. And consistency is king when it comes to shooting, because consistency equals precision. So in summary, you need to have a crystal clear plan for how you establish your shooting position. Okay, let's move on to the next problem, still relating to your shooting position. Let's see if you can recognize some of these symptoms. When you're shooting, your rifle jumps to the side. When you're shooting, you're not getting the precision you expect. You test different brands of ammunition, but they fail to deliver on the promises. Or is it you who actually failed to deliver? And finally, you might see your groups wander on the target from each session. And if you're like me, you start to question your scope when in reality it's probably you. So the root cause here is most likely that you interfere with recoil, which in very simple terms means that you push the rifle sideways when you shoot it, or you disturb the harmonics in other ways, forcing the rifle to jump. When I teach, I talk about different types of tension that you need to remove or balance to make sure that you manage recoil correctly. And I teach that through the camper model. And C in the camper model stands for contact tension. A stands for alignment tension or natural point of aim. M stands for muscular tension. P stands for positional tension, which you fix with self-check 2. And E stands for external tension. And although I call it external tension, it's really about harmonics, or the harmonics of your rifle. So in summary, you must not interfere with recoil. You must make sure that your rifle is able to recoil straight back and forth. Okay, next problem. Let's see if you recognize some of these symptoms. When you shoot, your rifle feels a little bit out of control. Maybe it's a lot out of control, like riding a bucking horse. Maybe it's a little bit out of control, like a toddler pulling stuff off a shelf. Either way, you want to get back into control. Maybe you need to reposition your rifle after each shot because it was jumping around. Or maybe you feel that recoil is unpleasant. It feels like the rifle is kicking and hitting you hard, making shooting less enjoyable. It's a little bit of an overlap between some of the symptoms from this issue and the previous. But most likely the cause here is the fact that you don't remove slack from your shooting position. So it means that you're not connecting with the rifle, you're not turning you and the rifle into a single shooting system, which is important because recoil that is not directed is misdirected. When I teach, I use the RGB model to help my students remember how to remove slack. R stands for rest, which could be removing slack from your bipod. G stands for grip, which means establishing an adequate grip for the rifle. And B stands for buttstock, which is a reminder to create a complete connection with the rifle. So in summary, when you've built the position, when you've removed the balance tension, you also must make sure that you've removed slack from the position. Okay, we're talking about learning how to shoot your rifle, learning it fast. And shooting is of course critical for your success as a hunter, but there's another factor that's equally important. I'm calling it out now to remind you that shooting is only part of the equation. And I'll get to that point later. Let's first move on. Let's move to the second of the three components, the shot, and look at some of the problems or pitfalls that you must avoid. So if you remember some of these symptoms, maybe you've been fumbling with your safety, slowing yourself down at a point where you should really be ready to shoot. Maybe you slammed the safety so hard because you were rushing it and spooked a deer that was really close. Or perhaps a range officer or another hunter called you out for incorrect safety and trigger management. The root cause here is most likely a lack of a clear procedure for safety and trigger management. And although this might seem like a minute detail, it's absolutely critical for your ability to balance safety, which is a non-negotiable, and trigger control, which is the foundation for being ready to shoot without wasting time and without wasting opportunities in the field. When I teach, I use a very simple reminder, the air gun, which is safety off and finger on. And when I say finger on, I don't mean pulling the trigger, I mean moving your trigger finger inside the trigger guard in a position where you are ready to shoot. So in summary, you need a clear plan for safety and trigger management. So you're safe, but ready to shoot. Okay, let's move on. Do you recognize these symptoms? You take too long aiming because you're uncomfortable with the wobble in your sights. Or your eyes get tired, you start blinking because of eye strain or fatigue. Or perhaps your sights are moving off the target because you're breathing when you're aiming, and the movement of the crosshairs makes you continue to micro-adjust your position, slowing you down. The root cause here is probably a lack of a clear procedure for how to aim and breathe correctly when shooting. Without such a procedure, it's likely that you'll either hesitate or rush a shot, and you want to avoid both those situations. To help hunters overcome these challenges, I teach the ABS model, like the brakes, but in this case, A stands for aim, and it's about being completely certain where to aim, which we'll get back to in a minute. B stands for breathe, which is around understanding your natural respiratory pause and how long time you actually should give yourself to breathe and aim. And S stands for sight picture, which is all about understanding what a correct sight picture looks like. So in summary, you must know what sight picture is go and how long time you have. And here's a key takeaway. With the correct presentation, you must show no hesitation. In other words, when the deer is positioned correctly, you must execute the shot immediately on autopilot. So let's move on and see if you recognize these symptoms. You're unsure where to put your finger on the trigger, or you're uncomfortable with your hand and finger position. Perhaps when you're dry firing, you can see that you're actually pushing your sights off target. Or when you're live firing, you see that you have inconsistencies in your point of impact. Specifically, you see that your sights are wandering down low and right if you're a right-handed shooter. The root cause is most likely poor trigger control. You might be yanking your trigger, or you might be pulling it incorrectly. Correct trigger pull is really very simple. You must pull the trigger straight back without disturbing the sights. But sometimes it can be challenging to figure out how to execute that advice. So when I teach, I use the PITS model. P stands for position, which means establishing the correct hand and finger position for you and your particular rifle. I stands for isolate, which means don't move your entire hand when you're pulling the trigger. T stands for tip, which means you've got to eliminate the curve. I stands for isolate, which means you've got to straighten the curve that your finger moves when you pull the trigger. And S stands for square, which is the essence of a good trigger pull. Pull the trigger straight back without disturbing the sides. So in summary, when you're shooting, you've got to focus on mastering your trigger pull. Don't think it's a done deal the moment you pull the trigger. You still have plenty of opportunities to mess things up. So let's work to make sure you don't. Before we get there, I want to mention that what I'm sharing in this video will take you very far. It'll help you speed up the learning curve and learn to shoot your rifle much faster than you otherwise would have. However, if you want more detail on the frameworks I'm sharing, if you want detailed instructions on all the various shooting positions, and if you want a training plan that takes you in 9 steps to go from 0 to hero, then you should check out the online course I created. I'll put a link in the description. So now we're getting to the last of the 3 overall components, which I call the follow-through. But it's more than traditional follow-through. So let's start with the first batch of symptoms. See if you recognize them. Have you ever poked your head above the scope after you've taken a shot? Have you ever celebrated with a high five before you really should have? Noticed yourself flinching at the moment of the shot? The root cause here is the lack of proper follow-through, which means that you're failing to stay on the rifle until the recoil cycle is complete. That could prevent the rifle from recoiling properly, but it'll definitely stop you from reacquiring your target quickly, which is important, but we'll get to that in a second. As many of the other checks, follow-through is pretty conceptually simple, but it can be difficult to remember. So when I teach, I use the FIST model. F stands for follow-through, and that's follow-through in the traditional sense for staying on the rifle. I stands for index points, which is a reminder to stay connected to the index points you established all the way back when you built the position. And S stands for sight picture, which means that follow-through includes re-establishing the sight picture. So in summary, you must follow through on each shot or after each shot. And remember, recoil pushes your sights off target, but the shot isn't over until your sights are back on target. Let's move on to the next set of symptoms. Have you ever had to take a follow-up shot, then realized you hadn't even reloaded the rifle? Have you ever taken a shot but been unsure what really happened, if and where you hit the deer? Or have you taken a shot and lost the sight picture completely? The root cause is most likely the lack of a clear post-shot routine, which is a big problem because it means that you will be less able to follow up on a wounded deer. You're not able to call the shot and plan your next action, and you're generally speaking not in control of the situation, which can ruin all your good work. When I teach a simple R times R equal R model to help my students stay on top of this step. The first R stands for review, which means you will observe and assess the situation. So you confirm the effect of the shot and determine your next steps. The next R stands for reload, which means you make sure that you are ready to act. And the final R stands for ready, because with review and reload, that's what you are. So in summary, you need to call the shot and reload because you must be in control even if the situation is out of control. However, we still have a big problem. Well, you still have a big problem. Remember I said that shooting is only part of the equation for a successful hunt. If you learn to shoot fast and you learn it fast, all your good work could be for nothing. And you remember I talked about aim, and I called out specifically where to aim. So ask yourself this question: what good are your shooting skills if you're not sure where to aim? And I'm not talking about general aiming somewhere on the deer. I'm talking about being 100% certain. Sure, maybe you have a good idea about where the vital zone is, but enough to avoid any hesitation. And what if the animal turns? What then? What if you're shooting from above, shooting from below? As a hunter, you need to master the key shot scenarios. And to help you do that, I've created a video with details on all those scenarios. And I've created diagrams and rules to help you understand all the details. Click this video to make the most of your shooting skills. Click this video to harvest wild meat and put trophies on your wall. Click this video to know exactly where to shoot a deer.